And now the moment we've all been waiting for. It's now my pleasure to announce the winner of the 2023 Toronto Book Awards.
The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbour Race excursion with the boys to have a time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vickery Bowles, and I'm the City Librarian here at Toronto Public Library, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2023 Toronto Book Awards. And we are at our brand new concourse level event space, so I'm particularly pleased to be welcoming you all here tonight to this wonderful new space. As always, the library is very pleased to partner with the City of Toronto on this book prize that has showcased and helped us all to appreciate the talented writers who live amongst us and are an inspiration that this city evokes. I'd like to start this evening by acknowledging that it's important for all of us to be mindful that all 100 branches of the Toronto Public Library are situated on an Indigenous land and Dish with One Spoon territory. This is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. Toronto Public Library gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. So this is, it's hard to believe, but this is the 49th year of the Toronto Book Awards. Established by Toronto City Council in 1974, the annual awards offer $15,000 in total prize money. Each shortlisted finalist will receive $1,000 with $10,000 awarded to the winner. The 2023 Toronto Book Awards jury comprises of writers, educators, and other dedicated members of Toronto's literary community. We thank them for their time, expert consideration, and dedication to the arts, and we're delighted they have been chosen such an incredible shortlist of books for this prestigious award. The Toronto Book Awards honors authors of books of literary and artistic merit that are evocative of Toronto, and I think that's really important for this award. And they can be novels, short story collections, books of poetry, books on history, politics and social issues, biographies, books about sports and children's and young adult books, graphic novels, and photographic collections are all judged together, making this one of the most distinct book prizes. And past winners are really notable, and I'm just going to name a few of them. Sarah Polley, Desmond Cole, David Cheriandy, Emily St. John Mandel, Margaret Atwood, and nominee tonight Dionne Brand. And looking back on the awards through the years makes us realize the incredible trajectory of the winners, making us all so very proud of what this city has to offer. Now, the first prize in 1974, going back to the very beginning, was awarded to Richard B. Wright, the author of In the Middle of a Life, and showcased his ability to write so-called ordinary people with depth and sensitivity. And then Richard went on to win critical acclaim for his 2001 novel, Clara. The Toronto Book Awards continues to celebrate both established and debut authors, and the 2023 shortlist includes debut authors from Sophie and Sheila Murray, introducing two incredible women to Toronto's literary scene. And from haunting family histories to explorations of gender, sexuality, race, and colonialism, the shortlist also includes the incomparable Dionne Brand and two art curators who are changing what it means to understand and contend with the history of Canada through art. These wonderful books are so engaging and diverse in their perspectives, are now part of the fabric of our city. And I encourage you all to read them. And I want to congratulate these fine writers who are here today on being shortlisted. So let's give them a round of applause. After the conclusion of tonight's event, I invite you to purchase a copy of these excellent titles from our book sponsor, Queen's Books, located right over here to the side, and they're waving just so you know who they are. And there will be a reception following the awards during which the finalists will be around and they can sign copies of the books that you've purchased. So without further ado, I will now introduce the host for this evening, Jessica Allen. Jessica is a correspondent on The Social, the Canadian Screen Award-winning talk show, now in its 11th season on CTV. Previously, she was a national columnist at Metro and an assistant editor covering the arts and culture beat at Maclean's magazine. You can often find her hosting award shows such as this one, along with her other charity, literary, film, and design events. The variety of her work has given Jess the chance to interview notable people from Trevor Noah and Greta Gerwig to an archaeologist who recreates ancient beers and an award-winning translator of the Iliad. Jess has a Master's of Art in Art History from the University of Toronto, and she currently lives in Hamilton, Ontario with her partner Simon. Please join me in welcoming Jess Allen. Jess?
That was nice. Thank you so much, Vickery. And welcome, you guys. Thank you for coming. I am so excited to be here tonight. This is my first time hosting the Toronto Book Awards, so a little nervous, but also very excited because I love books. And obviously, Toronto is home to some of the biggest and best talent in Canadian fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And this year's incredible shortlist showcases that. We're spoiled for literary choice in this city. So our jury of 5 dedicated book lovers, they had their work cut out for them. They considered a whopping 105 submissions that all evoke our city. So let's meet them. This year's jury included Kadri Akwenzi Dam. Kadri is a writer, poet, spoken word artist, publisher, Indigenous arts activist, and assistant professor of creative writing, Indigenous literatures, and oral traditions at University of Toronto, Scarborough. Kadri is a member of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation in Ontario. Next, Jamila Kanoon Aladina. Jamila is a writer and editor living in Toronto. Her short fiction has appeared in Room Magazine, The Puritan, and other publications. Stephen W. Beattie. Stephen spent more than 12 years as review editor at Quill Inquirer, Canada's magazine of the publishing trade industry. His writing and criticism have appeared in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the Walrus, and elsewhere. And Sue Carter. Sue is the deputy editor at Inuit Art Quarterly and the former editor-in-chief at Quill Inquirer. She frequently writes about culture for several publications and teaches writing and editing for magazines at Centennial College. Karen Lee. Karen is a Cave Canem Fellow, bread loaf writer, Jamaican patois court interpreter, and performance artist. Winner of the 2020 Pacific Spirit Poetry Grand Prize, Prism International. Her polyvocal refusals appear in the New Quarterly, Room, The Fiddlehead, the Malahat Review, and other publications. And yeah. The City of Toronto and Toronto Public Library thank you, jurors, profusely for the time and attention you all gave to the task of selecting your 5 favorite titles. Now, tonight's finalists have each evoked Toronto in their own unique way. Let's take a deeper dive together into the 5 books that made the 2023 Toronto Book Award shortlist. We're good. We got this. Wildfires is Sophie Jai's debut novel. No, yes, Sophie. Where's Sophie? Where is she? Yay! Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Professional. Sophie was born and raised in Trinidad, and while she currently lives in Oxford, England, she spent most of her life in Toronto. In an interview, Sophie said that she once heard somewhere that a writer's debut novel is a clearing of the throat, and that when thinking of Wildfire, she thought about what she wanted to write most before she died. Out came a novel with themes of family, love, and grief. In Wildfires, the protagonist Cassandra returns home to Toronto for a funeral when her beloved cousin Chevy dies. The big house on Florence Street is packed with her many mothers, sisters, aunts, a single uncle, and too many secrets to count. Why did Chevy never speak? Who is the man in the photograph hidden in her aunt's drawer? As the long, cold days pass, Cassandra excavates the corners of her memory and prods at the whirlwind women, trying to piece together the narrative of the family. Moving between Trinidad and Toronto, the past and the present, Sophie sets her scenes precisely, and the tension leaps off the page. The jury declares that with thoughtful prose and absorbing characters, Sophie's stunning debut cements her career as one to watch, AKA, she cleared that throat, and we cannot wait to read what's coming out next. Now, from a debut novelist to veteran Toronto Book Awards nominee and winner, the richly decorated, multi-genre, global literary icon Dionne Brand returns with Nomenclature, a document of 4 decades of witness, rages, history, and survival. Dionne Brand was born in Trinidad and lives in Toronto, and she is, of course, one of Canada's most accomplished poets and the 3rd Poet Laureate of Toronto. She is also a novelist, essayist, and documentarian whose work explores themes of gender, race, and sexuality. Journalist Huda Hassan notes that through her storytelling and activism, Brand has always found ways to respond to and reflect the times. One thread remains clear in her work. Her commitment to Toronto is her commitment to the people, histories, stories, and the expression of this place and beyond. Dionne famously asks her students, I love this, does the world need this line? The pristine clarity of her own necessary lines in Nomenclature are defiant experiments from a legendary imagination at once ancestral and singular. The city of Toronto is given voice, character, and eye in this staggering inventory. And the jury notes that Brand's profound lines are exquisite blades which insist, disturb, confront, demand, without apology, our eardrums. And now, from poetry to prose, Sheila Murray's Finding Edward navigates similar themes of race and Black identity in Toronto. Sheila was born and raised in England and now lives in Hamilton, Ontario. Shout out to Hamilton, that's where I'm from. Her father was Black and Jamaican, and her mother was white and English. But when she discovered a multiracial ancestry that spanned much of the world, it sparked an interest that led to her acclaimed novel we are celebrating right here tonight. In Finding Edward, a biracial Jamaican named Cyril Roundtree leaves his Caribbean home following his mother's death for the promise of a new life in foreign, the unfamiliar environs of Toronto. There, Cyril tries to fit into his new surroundings, earn enough money for his studies, and somehow create a family and community in an unknown and often threatening environment. When he discovers a cache of letters from a mixed-race man in the 1920s, he's determined to find out all he can about this mysterious individual named Edward. In her debut novel, Sheila has created a sharp and incisive study of Black history in Canada, from the Toronto neighborhood of the Ward in the early 20th century to the Atlantic Canadian community of Africville. The jury commends Murray's supple prose and confident storytelling, which makes Cyril's journey a fascinating and rewarding reading experience in a debut of uncommon power and pathos. Now, Indigenous artist Kent Monkman called history a narrative, a collection of stories sanctioned by the ruling power and reinforced through words and images that suit them. Indigenous art subverts that narrative and reveals an alternative people's history. Now, Wanda Nanibush is an Anishinaabe curator, artist, and educator based in Toronto. She is the curator of the Indigenous art at the Art Gallery of Ontario. Georgiana Uhlyarik is a Romanian-born Canadian art curator, historian, and teacher. She is currently the Frederick S. Eaton Curator of Canadian Art at the Art Gallery of Ontario. Now, together, Wanda and Georgiana edited Moving the Museum, a revelatory book that challenges and provokes readers to question and reestablish their relationships with Indigenous art by presenting new ways for museums to present and interact with Indigenous communities and artists. The book kicks the colonial gaze to the curb, insisting instead that museums and galleries radically shift what they've been doing and offers page after page enacting the potential of Indigenous art to empower, to inspire, and to create community. Wanda has taken up her role as a steward of Indigenous art at Toronto's Art Gallery of Ontario and uses it here in this book to present deeply grounded and transformative Indigenous knowledge in an accessible way, while Georgiana and other AGO colleagues offer support essential to enacting real change. Moving the Museum is an art book that is practical, radical, and necessary. And last, but certainly not least, comes a story of bigotry, passion, and cold-blooded murder that centers on one of Canada's most controversial true crime figures, Clara Ford. The author of this fascinating study is Carolyn Whitzman, a researcher, consultant, and advocate focused on housing and planning policy from the University of Ottawa. Now, this is very interesting. Carolyn did not set out to tell the story of Clara Ford when she began researching class structure in Parkdale during the mid-20th century. But after discovering newspaper clippings about a Black woman who was accused of murdering a wealthy white man in the West End neighborhood, Carolyn was intrigued and delved deeper into this story. Quill Enquirer says Whitzman paints a picture not only of what likely may have happened, but also of the lives of the people involved in the case, from the victim and the accused to the police officers, the lawyers, and judge involved in the eventual trial, and even a man who probably shouldn't have been so easily dismissed as a subject. So, bridging together coverage from the day with deep research and a page-turning narrative, not only does Whitzman's book reveal this little-known incident in Toronto's history, but, the jury affirms, it will also leave readers hungering for more of the city's stories to be recast through a modern lens. That is some shortlist, huh? That is just incredible. Let's give one more round of applause to the authors. And now, will all finalists and their representatives make their way to the stage?
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's such an honor to be awarding these prizes tonight. And the fact that a record-breaking 105 books evoking Toronto were submitted for consideration this year is all the proof we need to know that the city's literary scene has really grown into itself. So I think that's just incredible. The literary arts are at the heart of so much of our civic self-image. You can find past Toronto Book Award finalists and winners not just in bookstores and libraries, but in film and television. David Cheriandi's brother, Catherine Hernandez's Scarborough, and Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11 are just a few recent examples of Toronto's leap from the page to screen. And I suspect some of tonight's finalists might follow in their impressive footsteps. One of tonight's finalists will join an illustrious collection of Toronto authors and win the $10,000 grand prize and be recognized with a commemorative plaque at the Toronto Book Garden in front of Queen's Quay Terminal. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of the authors whose submissions this year made Toronto a character among the cast. So, our finalists are, and I'll start with Sophie Jai, Wildfires. There you go. You're welcome. Stay up here for a photo. And then Dionne Brand, Nomenclature, accepting on her behalf is poet Britta B. There you go. Thank you. You're very welcome. And next we have Sheila Murray, Finding Edward. And we have Wanda Nanibush, who isn't here tonight, but also Georgiana Uhlyarik, Moving the Museum. Oh, this is Wanda. Do you want to take Wanda?
Sure, I'll take Wanda's. I get two.
Yours. There you go. Thank you. And Carolyn Whitzman, Clara at the Door with a Revolver, and accepting on her behalf is editor James McNevin. So here we go. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. It's now my pleasure to announce the winner of the 2023 Toronto Book Awards. And after much deliberation, this year's jury selected Moving the Museum as the winner of the 2023 Book Award. Congratulations, Wanda and Georgiana. Georgiana, please come up to the stage.
I think the most important thing that I want to say is to obviously thank the jury and this incredible award that is only just slightly younger than I am. And just really acknowledge that this kind of publication and the kind of work that we do really is very much a team work. Oh, I'm almost going to cry. When I think about the most unbelievable and such committed staff that we have, but I think most of all I would like to thank the artists, whether they're still with us or they've passed on. They really truly are our inspiration. It is an unbelievable honor to be in this category, which is why I just did not prepare, because I just did not think this was something that could occur. So to artists and for doing the things that they do, uninvited, often unsupported, but they give us really reason to live, and I am so grateful to be in this room with everybody and to work with the people that I work with at the Archive Ontario. It is an unbelievable privilege. Thank you so much.
First of all, congratulations. Yeah, take a moment. We'll start off very simply because if you haven't yet seen the book, it is truly stunning. It in itself is a work of art. So tell us about the conception. How long did it take from the time you conceived of it to being able to hold it in your hands?
Well, I think the story really starts a lot earlier, and it starts with this moment when Wanda and I had this idea that we should rethink the way that Canadian art functions at the AGO. And she and I came up with this idea that what we wanted to do is think about the treaty relationships, the peace and friendship treaties that really govern this space and have governed relations between Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, and think about the values that are inherent in these treaties. And for me, this made total sense because I am not from here, and I've always tried to understand where I am, which is why I went to study Canadian art at the University of Toronto. And so in conversations that I would have with Wanda, is we tried to conceive this idea of sharing space, sharing power, sharing responsibilities, and what does that look like within a museum, and what does that look like within acquisition program, an exhibition program? How does that manifest itself publicly? And so we came up with this idea of a co-led department within the institution. And the most extraordinary thing about it is that we were working nation to nation, which meant then the rest of the institution also had to adapt to this. And this is kind of the power of a kind of a small change and a small shift. If Wanda was here, as she was at other events, you will see she has like ferocious and extraordinarily large personality. So there's a way in which things can just happen and can just move. And then together we're able to kind of insist on this kind of radical new way of working every day in everything that we do. And so this was 5 years in the making. This happened in October 2017, so it's now 6 years, exactly 6 years. And because of COVID and because of the success in a way of the department and how it manifests itself publicly at the AGO, people came and they could see our shared relationship working together in the way in which we installed exhibitions. And because there was a really wonderful demand to understand how we work together, we thought a book made most sense, so that it would kind of be a record of a moment in time. It would really be a kind of way to say, this is what's possible now. This is how you can create change in this moment. And we wanted to mark that, and then hope that other generations can pick up on that and actually continue to make that really fundamental change. Because, you know, the more power you give away, the more power you have. It's an extraordinary thing. So people always asked me why this was a kind of a relationship that worked, and it works because it really is constantly generative. Yeah.
Now, and you're no stranger to collaboration, doing what you do, but this book feels like a level of collaboration on a whole new, incredibly inspiring level. But were there any challenges that came with that? You can be honest, it's just us. Wanda's not here.
You know, the challenge is the challenge of that kind of comfort and resistance to change in general. You know, it's like, why do we have to do this when we've always done it this way? But I will have to say that overall, the challenge is only the challenge you kind of set to yourself, and I think that we're very lucky in that. Jim Shedden is here. He's our manager of publications.
Oh, wow.
And he always makes the most gorgeous, beautiful books.
Wow,
Yes,
does he ever?
he really does. And so that's why it's so much about collaboration, and it's so much about setting your own deadlines and your own goals and really sticking to them and achieving them. And I have to say that there is this moment at the AGO where we can do this. I mean, I've worked there for 20 years. I couldn't even possibly imagine this when I started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that is certainly the challenges. What was the most rewarding aspect of this collaboration? And it was quite beautiful, actually, when you got a tad emotional. And I'm guessing that's because you're thinking of all of the people that came together to create this beautiful book.
Yes, and it's everybody who works there. It's all the editors and the designer, everybody. But I have to emphasize again, it is really so much about the artists. The most privileged thing that I have in my life is that I have a badge that allows me to go to the vault, and in the vault I can see anything that we have in the collection. It is an extraordinary encounter that is just really one-on-one, and I strive in my work to make that an experience that anybody can have when they walk through the AGO, because I think that within this encounter that you have with an artist's work, you really encounter their consciousness, and you are able to have a conversation in that moment, a very contemporary conversation. And I don't remember the rest of your question.
Just the most rewarding part of...
So artists. They are so extraordinary and inspiring, and you get to sometimes go to their studio, and you sometimes get to see their sketches, and sometimes you get to just be around them and listen to them, and this is an extraordinary thing. And we are so lucky in this city, in this province, in this country, in this hemisphere, in this world, to be surrounded by so many creative, extraordinary people whose labor of imagination we get to simply be part of. And it's I cannot I cannot be more lucky than to be able to be part of this artistic community and have this recognition. Is beyond anything I could imagine.
Would you tell us about some of, I guess, the radical acts that you and Wanda and the rest of your colleagues at the AGO have done to that are sort of chronicled in this book? I'm thinking about, speaking of chronicle, the abandonment of chronological hanging. Tell us about that.
Well, I think we think about the way in which anyone encounters art, anyone makes art, anyone sometimes may be afraid of art, unnecessarily so. It is not scary, it's a wonderful thing. So the way we wanted to show our collection was to be able to have a kind of an embodied experience, so like have an emotive experience, to kind of understand what it meant to be a kind of a whole human. So even though there doesn't appear to be chronology, because that it can be a very limiting thing, there is a different kind of chronology we tried to conjure up, and that is the chronology of your own consciousness as it comes into being. So notions of origins, notions of self identity, notions of relationship that you have with the land, the water, ways in which we are transformed in experiences to which we cannot add any words. So there are before and beyond language. And then also to really focus on the work of Indigenous artists whose voice had been absent for so long, and to have that Indigenous-centered, Indigenous-led conversation, because it really enriches everything. And I think, you know, there are people who maybe feel challenged in this idea that Indigenous-led, it doesn't mean that everybody else follows. That's not the point. The point is that you're actually in relation. And being in relation is what we always all are. We are social, fundamentally social people, beings, and to recognize what it means to be in relation, to take responsibility for what that means, to not interfere in the other, to respect and value and always act with integrity. These are core values that no one can deny, are the core values that we really should uphold, that we should live in our daily lives. So it manifests itself in lots of different ways, sometimes in strange ways, but overall, I think that we want to model a way of being that is about moving forward and moving forward together.
Oh, that's a very nice answer. I'm glad you took. I got it. Were there any books or institutions around the world that provided inspiration at all for what you guys have done, or do you really feel like you're sort of innovators in this?
Well, it's fascinating because in a way it's a very specific book, and I'm so glad it's about Toronto because it really is in Toronto. So what I'm hoping is that it's kind of a case study for something that can be applied, you know, to many other museums who may be trying to figure out how to do this. And I think museums are struggling, and I think if Wanda was here, she would say that there's no models.
There's no models, you guys did it.
We just made it up, and it's us, and there you go. I'm just gonna, as though she's saying it, but I'm saying it. I'm just gonna own that one. And no, there wasn't anything that I can think of, no.
Oh, that makes it even more valuable, I think, and it's right in our city. I'd love to hear quickly more about the texts in the suite of galleries that were translated into Indigenous languages. What was it like finding people who could do the translating and working with them?
Well, this is also a fascinating part of it. So, for example, Tuckerlick Partridge, who now works with us, she's an Inuit curator. She wrote her poem in Inuktitut. And so we worked with her to find Inuit elders to translate our text into Inuktitut. And then Wanda worked most closely with the Anishinaabe translators. And what was fascinating, you know, in listening to her talking about that process is that it, and again, being in relation means that it changes both languages. And you started with Kent Monkman, and I remember Wanda talking about the fact that she was having a conversation with the elder about translation for the text that went with his work of art in Anishinaabe. And the text, she wrote the text in English, and it used the word camp, you know, as a kind of like camp style that goes with Kent Monkman. Campy. but there was no such word in Anishinaabe Mowin. They just kept translating it into kind of like camping, you know? So it's this sort of this fascinating back and forth where language is translated because of this invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing for me, the most moving thing for me, because I also don't work or function in my own language, I think of language as home. And so the idea that you are a Inuk young person that's walking through the AGO and you can read about Inuit art in your own language, so you don't have to read about it in translation, in the translation of the colonial voice, to me seems the most sort of simple gesture that we can make. And I love this idea that and we got lots of comments and kind of notes, letters from Anishinaabe artists who said what a great pleasure it was to walk through the AGO and read about art in Anishinaabe Mowin. And you know, it makes all of the hard, tricky parts of working at a large institution worth it.
Wink, wink. That's beautiful. It's got to be one of the most welcoming gestures that I can think of. 2 more questions. What's next for you? A little break, maybe, just like.
Well, you know, what I write about in the book is an essay called Dear Canadian Art, I've Been Thinking About You. And I write about the real importance of women artists, especially women artists from the 1970s, who have really shaped my way of thinking about art and curating and being in the world, and the way in which I feel that I inherit their responsibility. And so there are a number of really critical artists that have not received the attention. And so now I'm working on Joyce Wheeland, an artist who is also very, very Toronto. She's born and became the larger-than-life personality and unbelievable artist here in Toronto. So that's my next big project, yeah.
That sounds like a very exciting project. And lastly, let's just say, remember when you were talking about that vault that you have the card for? Let's just say no one was looking, and you could, obviously you'd return the piece, but you could take one piece home with you, just for 24 hours, safe environment. What piece would it be?
I can't take anything from the vault, just so everybody understands. I can go and look at it, but I can't take it. You know, actually the best part about being in the vault is that sometimes you open a box and you don't know what's going to be in the box, and the most extraordinary thing comes out of the box. I mean, this happened so very many times. So I think it's that experience that I would like to hold on to.
That's a very good answer. I can imagine just losing time coming across something and...
Although I would take a Katie Kolwitz just for sentimental reasons.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you once again, and congratulations once again. Now, there will